Welcome to Creative Clarity, Season 2 of the original podcast, Intentional Harmony. Season 2 is all about talking with some of the most creative minds I can get my hands on. These people have two things in common. They're passionate about what they do, and they love to create. From writers, to musicians, to artists, to business entrepreneurs, you're going to learn a ton. My name is Katie Warren, and I'm a creativity coach who helps entrepreneurs stop playing small and start living the life that they love through their creative gifts. Are you stuck in your 9-to-5 job? Maybe feeling like you're not good enough to make a living off of your creative gift? You're looking for more? Maybe even wondering how you can start your own business in a creative industry? Then you are in the right place, my friend. You're going to hear me cover topics all about understanding and improving the creative process. You're also going to hear interviews from amazing creative minds, learning what makes them tick, how they overcome creative blocks, how to generate new ideas, and how to get inspired. Sit back, grab some coffee, and let's get to it. Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to episode 4 of Intentional Harmony, Creative Clarity, Season 2. I am so excited about today's guest, Danny McCrum. Danny is just all around an awesome guy, but it was really awesome talking to him. He is a really well-known figure in the New Zealand music scene. Over the years, he's worked with a ton of top artists, including Eric Clapton, John Mayer, Jeff Beck, Norah Jones, and Simple Minds. He started everything when he was 12, and like most of us creatives, just felt that bug to keep going and keep doing it. You can hear the passion as he's talking, and I love the practical approach that he brings to everything in the music business and the creative industry in general. He's produced several EPs, he's self-managed his shows and tours around New Zealand, and in 2005, he launched his company, Paper Plane Productions. With starting any kind of company from scratch, you have a lot to learn, and he realized that it's not just about talent in the music industry. It's about being practical and having a business mind and learning actual business tools and tactics to use to make him become successful. I met Danny off of a networking website for podcast hosts. I found his podcast, Don't Give Up Your Day Job, and I was hooked immediately. If you haven't checked it out, you absolutely need to, especially if you are a musician in the industry, but even just as a creator in general, it's a great podcast. And what they do is they talk to creative professionals about their lives and their experiences in the entertainment business. But one of their main things is to emphasize that having a practical approach to business in the arts is going to be critical for success. So I hope you enjoy this interview. I'm going to stop talking and let Danny start because you will not be disappointed. He's got a lot of insight, a lot of quality things to share with us for the musician and just for the creator in general. I definitely could have talked to this guy for at least another hour. So without further ado, Danny McCrum.
Just problem solve. Don't default to the templates. Just problem solve and do it independently. Maybe the answer is to operate your career like a career has never existed before. You know, so you're inventing it for the first time. That's probably the way to find the right answer.
We're just going to jump right into this thing because I'm excited to, hear your point of view on everything, and let's just kind of kick it off. And so you started when you were 12, it looks like on the bio you sent me. So how did it all start? When did you first realize this was something you wanted to do?
It was very early, and it wasn't a conscious thought really. It was, I was just really drawn to music from as far back as I can remember. I remember being like a toddler and just sort of taking it in a very, uneducated way, obviously. I was just drawn to the radio whenever it was on, probably like most musicians. And then I think there were two moments that really changed things for me. And it was when I saw the movie The Commitments, and also when I saw the stage show that played in New Zealand in the 80s, the Buddy Holly story. And those two shows put it in my brain, the idea that this was an operation, this was a career, And I realized at that point that being a musician wasn't just about playing the music. It was actually a career, it was a job. And that got me really excited. So I think that was, I don't even remember when that was. Like I might have been 8 or 9 or something. I'm like, that's what I want to do.
There was no other option for you, right? People were like, what do you want to do when you grow up? And you wanted to be a musician.
Yeah, I don't know if I was thinking I don't know if I was thinking about that yet. I was still thinking about being a pop star because that's all you kind of get shown. I realized it locked in for me when I turned 12, because then I started playing guitar. I'd been playing piano before that, but it didn't really connect with me. I started playing guitar. Within a few weeks of being able to change chords and things, I realized I could write songs. I realized that if you could play chords, you could put them together your own way and write a song. And I thought, well, that's amazing. So then I wrote like 3 or 4 songs a week for the next 20 years. And my friends at that time were also playing, and now we were talking about, like, we're going to put a band together, we're going to show everyone, we're going to take over the world, you know. And the context of the time, that made more sense back then.
Sure.
You know.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, even just watching like Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, and they saved the world through music, you know, and they're like, that's what we want to do. This wasn't very well thought out, obviously, but
but you have an innocent mind, and it's like, I almost wish we could keep that forever, you know, like,
so do I.
Endless possibilities.
Absolutely. Yeah. So from there, it just became an obvious choice, and it really didn't feel like there were any other options. I mean, everything else in my life was going horribly wrong, so that was the only thing that was going right. It was kind of a no-brainer. I like it. It's the only thing that works, so obviously that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Was it accepted well in your community? So I know you're in New Zealand, so how was it when you told people, you know, you were a musician? Did you get any pushback?
New Zealand is a very sport-orientated country, and our relationship with music, we still to this day, really, we treat music like a hobby. So people like it, and they are outwardly supportive, but they don't really believe it's a viable you know, direction to head in. So I got pushback from everywhere.
Sure.
All of my teachers, parents, anyone I spoke to, with the exception of my buddies, you know. And for us, it felt very punk rock. It actually, I think it motivated us more.
Yeah.
And I wonder if I had really supportive people in my life back then, I don't know if I would have pursued it as hard, because it was kind of our way of rebelling. Like, screw you, we're going to do it.
So how is that evolving over time then? So as you got older, people realized, oh man, he's really going to make a career out of this. Like, how did that have like a moment where it flipped, or was it gradual?
It must have, I guess so. I probably have to ask everybody else to get that answer. But the other thing I think is worth pointing out is that it's not like I was amazing. You know, I wasn't a prodigy or anything. I wasn't like little Stevie Wonder, you know. I was a kid who could barely play guitar. My voice was breaking. I didn't know anything about production. Like, our first gig, my first performance of my own material was in front of my intermediate school with my friend. We just did a duo thing. We didn't know to mic up the acoustic guitar in any way, and it didn't have a pickup. So I'm pounding away on this nylon string, and no one would have heard it. You know, I was singing through the principal's speech mic, so I was coming out of the intercom dotted around the room, and my friend was playing electric guitar through a little practice amp at the back of the stage. So he would have sounded like a mosquito. You know, I was all voice breaking and squeaky up the front of the stage, and no one could hear my guitar. We got ridiculed for that. So it's not. This is not a story of like the world was wrong because we were clearly so amazing. No, this is a story of a kid who could barely play but liked it and stuck with it. And somewhere along the way, I sort of figured out how to do it better. And I guess I think the first thing people realized was that I was stubborn. You know, I wasn't going to back down very, very quickly. And then eventually I made a career out of it. And I think a lot of people kind of went, oh, okay, there you go.
Yeah, I think everyone in like this any type of creative industry, right? We have to have that stubborn side to us, because
yes,
I mean, we get pushback all the time. So if you're not stubborn, it's going to beat you down.
absolutely. You know? I mean, a life and career in music is not much to do with music.
Right.
Anyone, yeah, anyone can play music. I don't believe there's such a thing as talent. I think anyone can play. It's just a skill. You just work at it. Good advice, good strategies, all that sort of stuff. But being able to play music or write a song does not mean you can have a career.
Yeah.
They're not the same thing.
Absolutely. I 100% agree. So you have produced your own EPs, you've self-managed shows and tours. So what was it like kind of getting into that and the more of like the managing tours and performance role?
Well, a lot of my story, it looks different looking back as it did at the time. You know, at the time, I didn't want to do any of that stuff. You know, I'd bought into the dream. What was supposed to happen was that I was going to get really, really good and write great songs and have a great band. And then some mysterious figure at the back of the room, at a gig was going to come up and go, you guys are the guys, sign this piece of paper and everything's sorted out. And then cut a couple moments later, I'd be floating in my swimming pool trying to figure out who I can get to count my money. You know what I mean? That was the plan. And so you get a reality check when you go out into the world and you go, oh, it doesn't really work like that. So the option was I organize the tour or we don't go on tour. I organize making the record or we don't make the record. And so I wasn't necessarily happy about it. It was more of a necessary evil. And along the way, I realized that actually being independent is sort of genius. And as the music industry arguably collapsed, being independent and not signing all your rights away is probably one of the best things you can do these days.
It saved you.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I mean, I'm still here.
Yeah.
If I was giving 90% of my cut to someone else, I don't think I could be here.
Well, and it gave you some ownership of that too, right? I mean, it's a little bit different. Like there are no other options if you're managing yourself, right? You have to make it work. It's easier to kind of take the easy way out if someone else is doing it for you,
And of course that means that I was forced to upskill. Yeah. I was forced to, when I went full-time as a musician, I had to figure out how to run a company. I had no idea how to do that. So I just had to figure, what does that mean? What do I have to do? I literally had no idea. And I kind of realized that doesn't really mean much apart from just being logical and organized and, making sure you pay your taxes, So I think if I had landed in that stereotypical career when I was, somewhere between 18, 22, something like that, I think I probably would be far more one-dimensional and far less employable now, because I've had to figure out how to project manage and how to run budgets and how to manage people and all the stuff that comes along with it. I've been forced to learn, which now makes me incredibly independent. Now I'm not beholden to anybody. Now I work with my team and we do whatever we want.
When you were building your team, were you looking for certain things to kind of help balance you out? How was it building that company from the ground up?
Well, because I didn't know how to run a company, I immediately sought advice from business, other business owners and mentors and so on. I realized in the early days that business was actually the answer to a life in music. Because if you try and get advice from the music industry, they tend to just tell you the same crap that's been going around on a loop for years. And most of the time it's not helpful. It's just and often not based in reality. If you want a career in the arts, you're basically just becoming a small business owner. You're just an entrepreneur, which means you've got incomings, outgoings, just basic stuff, right? So no, and I knew a couple of significant musicians at the time, but they weren't going to tell me that. It was the people in business who went, well, maybe you should write down a plan. Maybe you should have a financial forecast or make a business plan, things like that. And I thought, oh yeah, that makes perfect sense. So I attached myself to a few individuals who were really generous with their time, and I went on a couple of back then they had day-long courses on different subjects, and I signed up for all of them that I could get to, and just did it that way. And in regards to assembling the team, that's always been tough. It's it's hard enough to put a band together of good players. It's even more difficult to put a band together of good players that also have the right kind of mind that understand the plan. Because rock and roll musicians, when you start going, we're going to do this and we're going to do this and it's going to lead to that, sometimes they're like, what are you talking about? Let's just get high, So, that's always been my dilemma. And I think I'm in a much better position these days because now I have the great fortune to work with really, really professional, really established players who know all the same stuff as that I'm saying now,
Yeah.
So now we don't really have problems with that stuff. But back then, it's hard, man. It's really hard.
Sure, for sure. If it was easy, everyone would be doing it. We'd all be millionaires, right?
Yeah, that's right.
The passion that keeps us going.
Yeah. Or again, just stubbornness.
Or the stubbornness.
Yeah. Sometimes you got to be like a pit bull, just grab on. Don't let go.
So you've got a really successful podcast. So I'm curious to hear about how you got started with that, and like what was the motivation? Because you just seem like you always have to add things to your plate, and you're addicted to being busy. So
Yeah, I really am, and I've been actually trying a lot harder in recent times to get some more balance in my life, because I'm not very good at stopping and resting and all of that. But the podcast came about. I was on tour a few years ago with a chap called Bobby Kennedy. Bobby is a drummer in one of the most successful bands in New Zealand history, a band called Upskill. And at the time they had broken up. And I had this long career that didn't include becoming famous or anything, but I'd sort of had this, pretty good career. He had a good career that included that side of things. So we had similar stories, but also opposing stories a little bit. I still often have to walk into the room and work a little bit to get respected or treated properly.
yeah.
Because some people look you up and down and go, who the hell is this guy? Whereas I'd be often on the same gig with him and he would get the royal treatment because he was from the famous band. And I thought that, I didn't resent it. I thought it was hilarious. But we were traveling between shows one day and we're having yet again another big conversation about industry, music, the whole thing, the way musicians always do. And I said, this is the good stuff. This is these conversations that we have in the van and in the hotel lobbies and things like that. These are the real conversations, and you don't get these conversations publicly. They're not available publicly because everyone's peddling something,
Yeah.
So you see an artist on TV and the interviewer goes, how's the tour going? And they go, fantastic. It went brilliantly. We had a great time. Crowds were great, and they really, because it's not going to better their career if they go, it really sucked. We didn't sell any tickets. We lost money. We fought with each other, So those are the stories that fall out when you're in the van and no one's listening. And I said, wouldn't it be interesting if we could catch those conversations and put them out there somehow? And he said, well, I've had this idea to create a documentary called Don't Give Up Your Day Job. And on the documentary, we could showcase this side of the business and sort of give the real behind the scenes of what it really means to have a long-term life and career in the arts. And he had been trying to get this off the ground for a few years, but he found it hard to sell the idea to the networks and he found it hard to find people to partner with. And I said, well, why don't you turn it into a podcast? And he said, why? And I said, well, a documentary obviously is really, really expensive. And then you've got to get someone to buy it and play it. It's very time consuming. And then once it's done, it's over. And it's now only relevant to that 6-month period that you made it. And then it's just retrospective, then it's in the past, it's irrelevant.
Yeah.
And on top of that, you have to limit the themes that you want to cover in the podcast, and you have to limit the number of guests because you can't jam 150 guests into one, an hour-long documentary. So if we have a podcast, it'll cost almost nothing to make. We can stay relevant by continuing to release them, and we can have as many subjects covered and as many guests as we want as long as we keep it going. And I think for him, that kind of went, oh yeah, that's the way to get into it. That's the way to do it. So we basically just started it on that. Neither of us had any experience interviewing or presenting anything. We're both just musicians, and we just tried it. And you can hear us stuttering and floundering all over the place on the first episodes. But just as time went on, we just sort of settled into it, and then people started to say, "You guys are pretty good at this," and it ended up being really fun. So here we are.
So did you do any marketing, or was it pretty much this person heard it and they told someone else about it and it was just word of mouth? How did you get it out there?
Pretty much word of mouth. Yeah. We could probably always do more with marketing. We of course there's all the social media stuff you try, and a little bit of advertising locally and things like that. It's really hard to market a podcast, as I'm sure you're discovering too.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And it's a really exciting industry because it's kind of it's like the one industry that's left that's real and authentic and organic and all that stuff. And I like that it hasn't been sort of stitched up into rules yet. Yeah. People can make their podcast however they want to do it. And it feels like the new movement. But of course, like always, there's now about 1 million podcasts out there, at least. And so trying to get, your head above that crowd is very challenging. And I don't have all the answers for that.
Yeah, for sure. So when you guys started this podcast, was it still kind of had it caught on in your area? Or is it still kind of this new thing that some people are dabbling into? Because it just recently, I would say in the last not even 2 years has picked up more momentum where I am right now.
Yeah.
Still a very niche type of medium, I guess. So
Mm.
what is it like with you guys? Is it really popular over there?
I think people are finally starting to get into listening to podcasts here, but there aren't many down here.
Okay.
You know, there aren't many being made. And the other podcasts in New Zealand that are about a sort of similar thing, I've been a guest on those podcasts too. Like, we're all friends, you know. But yeah, we kind of had that advantage. I think we were sort of first to the punch a little bit when it came to a podcast on this subject. And now, yeah, there's only a handful that I know about in New Zealand that are anywhere sort of near related to us.
Yeah.
And I've, you know, I'm fully supportive of those podcasts as well. But yeah, I think we're a little bit behind in general with podcasts as a country, in the sense that I think I still find myself talking to people who go, oh, you know, I'd like to listen to it, but it's, you know, it's over an hour long. I don't know how I'd find the time. I'm like, what are you talking about? But listen to it in the car. Listen to it when you're cooking. Listen to it when you're vacuuming or walking the dog. There's loads of times to listen to a podcast.
Yeah.
You know? And you kind of have to teach people. And then they get into it and they go, I can't believe I didn't listen to this before, you know?
It's so addicting.
Yeah, it really is. I listen to loads. Yeah, I love it.
I guess, although you have to be a podcast lover to do podcasting on your own. So, I mean, you can't host a podcast and then hate podcasts. So I guess.
No, I think that's true. I think one thing that gives me an edge with what we do is that I don't really believe in the music industry. I think the music industry is incredibly dysfunctional. And so I think I come at it from I'm not talking from a position of loving and worshipping and trying to defend the music industry. If anything, I'm trying to worm my way in to get to the bottom of things and expose the truth, you know. Like, I love podcasting, but I also think it's funny how basically anyone can start a podcast. And so there's obviously something wrong with all of us, because we all think we've got something unique to say, you know. And to me, I just think that's hilarious, you know. So I think there's sort of a bit of tongue in cheek in how I approach it, because I kind of know it's silly, but I don't care because it's still fun.
It makes it great though. It like adds to the character of your podcast. I love it.
Yeah. I'm forever undermining myself.
That's part of being a musician too, I have to say. So.
That's right. That's part of our nature. That's it.
So I wanted to focus on your music career first, because I'm a musician myself. We have most of them are musicians in the audience. And that was season 1. It was all about like, okay, you want to be a professional musician, like, where do you start? 101, right? Season 2 is flipping and kind of hitting the creative process, because I feel like it's not tapped into enough. You know, people don't talk about having creative blocks and like how they just keep moving when it feels like you're walking through mud. So I want to dive a little bit into your creative process. Let's just like, how do you pull your inspiration? Does it just like hit you, or do you get it from like watching movies or listening to books or other podcasts? Like, how does that creative inspiration happen for you?
Well, when I started writing songs, like I was saying before, as soon as I could assemble chords, I went, oh my God, I can write songs, you know? And then that was just an immediate way to get stuff out, you know? So I was just, and my life was in a shambles, so I had a lot to get out. So it was just about expression, pure expression for me at the time. And it became a way that I was able to actually understand what the problems were, in a way, because I could actually, I'd write something and then I'd think, that's not really what I mean. It's not quite that. So I'd cross it out and I'd think, what do I actually mean? And I go, that's what it is. So I'm frustrated about this or whatever. So it sort of became a therapy for me. And I got so into writing that I just wrote so many songs. It was crazy. I just wrote, I mean, most of them are terrible, but I wrote probably 3 or 4 songs a week. And I think what happened was that just became I think it's like a muscle, you know, you sort of just get really good at writing. So these days, I don't know if I have a process. I think if I feel like writing something, I just know how to do it somehow, just because I've just done it so much, you know? Yeah. And so where does the inspiration come from? I think probably all of us are just looking anywhere. To give one answer would be to probably narrow it down too much. I think it's always about your life and what's going on, or something you saw. I mean, you know, sometimes, as I'm sure you know, you watch a movie and it just really moves you, and and then you have to write something, you know? So I think part of the reason why it's hard to bottle all this stuff up is because it's so random.
For sure. And that the song that you have, that Hustle Bustle, is like a perfect example of just like what's going on in your life right now and all of the
That's right.
chaos and, you know, and so that definitely shows.
Yeah. The funny thing about Hustle Bustle is that, because of course songwriters don't always write literally about their lives. You know, sometimes they write very poetically, or sometimes I'll be writing about something that actually happened 25 years ago, or something. You know what I mean? Or something that never even happened, but the story, the emotion behind it is real. So you sort of write in an abstract way. The funny thing about Hustle Bustle was that I wrote this idea, which hadn't happened to me, about this guy goes somewhere, like to a beach resort or something, falls in love with this girl. She's the one, but he's got a life in the city, and she's totally loving living in this beautiful sort of more rural area. And they're now trying to figure out what to do. And he's like, do I give up my entire career in life to go and be with her? Or do I try and convince her to come to the city? And then she's going, why the hell would I go to the city? It's beautiful where I live, you know? And so this is the conflict that the song's written around. And I just pulled that out of thin air. That was just an idea. But then one of my oldest friends, like when we're in the middle of recording it, he goes, oh man, I met this girl and she's absolutely wonderful, and I'm totally head over heels for her. The problem is that she lives at the complete other end of the country. So I don't know what to do. You know, I don't know if she's going to come up here, or I'm thinking about moving down there, but there's no career for me down there. And he was telling me this whole thing, and I'm like, this is crazy. You're like, I just wrote a song about this. And he goes, well, is there an answer in the song? Like now I was going to tell him what to do. And I was like, no, it doesn't ever resolve. And he's like, damn it. And the outcome of that actually was she moved to the city. She's up here now with him. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Elizabeth Gilbert has this theory of like, there's an idea and it just keeps moving through the universe, right? And if someone doesn't grab onto it, it just goes to the next person. So I feel like that's what happened. I mean, it's his life and you just kind of grabbed onto that.
Yeah. And I think that's probably what music is really, isn't it? Because when you write something and you connect with an audience, the audience is sort of putting that into their lives. Mm-hmm. I think, and at least for me as a fan, that's what I do. I go, that's how I feel. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, we cope with it. We relate to it. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
That's right.
When you are writing, inevitably we run into blocks, right? So if you just like, you hit your roadblock, like you can't generate ideas, what do you do?
Okay, I love this subject because I've never had a problem with it. And the reason why I've never had a problem with it is just because I look at it a certain way. The way that I look at writer's block is if I've got writer's block, I've clearly got nothing to say. So the answer isn't to force it. The answer is to put the instrument down and go and live a few more days of your life. Wait for life to screw you over again, and then you have something to write about, you know, or whatever, you know what I mean? It shouldn't be a forced process. When it comes to the actual, you're inside the song itself and you've got the initial idea, but often we get stuck on these ideas and we can't finish the song. I just think don't force it, because the best songs always just come out of nowhere and they just write themselves almost. So what I do is I just ride the inspiration until it stops. And when it stops, I just put it down. And if that song comes back to me later, then I'll finish it. But I've learned over time, never agonize over it. There's always another song you can write, you know? So I just have this much more kind of looser way of approaching it, like it's not up to me to force the song, it's up to the song to reveal itself, kind of thing. And if it's a strong idea, that'll happen, you know?
I love that.
Yeah, but when it comes to, I think writer's block for a lot of big artists is when they've got, especially in the older industry, when they'd be on a particular record deal and they would have to deliver an album by a certain time. So you've got to finish the album and deliver it by September or something like that. I think that's when a lot of big names would really struggle. And I've never been in that position because I've always sort of done things on my own time. But I can imagine that, I don't know if I'd struggle with that, because I feel like if someone paid me money to write a new album in the next 3 weeks, I feel like I could. I don't know if it'd be very good, but I feel like I could. Because again,
because you're stubborn.
Because exactly. I'll just do it. And I think also songs aren't that hard to write. They're just, you just stick things together. And like I teach songwriting quite a bit. And people seem to have this idea that some really hard to grasp mystical thing. It's not, just stick things together. The measure of whether it's good is if you like it. You know, you put something together and you go, that sounds lame. Well, then it's lame. you know, you know what I mean? Like if someone writes something,
It's
go
so much more complicated.
exactly. It's not that complicated. I mean, I call it the goosebump measure. If I write something and I get goosebumps, then it's probably a good idea.
Yep. You're writing for yourself, not necessarily to please other people.
Yes, yes, definitely. I think the only part of that's a bit of an exception is that I really love good musicians. I really love good musicianship. So I also write for the band. I also, like whoever I'm working with at the time, I'll write something I think, I can't wait to see what this person does with this, you know? And I've got some great musicians in my life, and I know I could just write. I mean, we did a song actually earlier this year, and I knew that it was going to be, I knew the lineup. Obviously, our bass player is a really, really great bass player, and I just put in like a reference track, but I didn't want to write a bass line, even if it was temporary, because I didn't want to put anything in his head. So I literally just put root notes on the changes, and just put them in through a MIDI keyboard, and knowing he's going to do something mental. It's going to be good. I have no idea what it's going to be, and I guess I kind of set him up for that. And of course, what he came back with was just really freaky and insane and awesome, and made the whole song cool.
Yeah.
So I write for the people I'm working with, or write for the project I'm working for, which I find really nice. I actually really enjoy that. Yeah.
Awesome. So what is it like collaborating with a bunch of creative minds? Like, are there moments where I'm sure it can get frustrating, and it can also be really, really like inspiring and exciting. So like, talk about your creative process when you're collaborating with others.
Yeah, it was frustrating and difficult in the early days because I just didn't know how to do it. And in the early days, I think probably we've all been there, where we think we know what we're talking about, and we think our idea is better, and no, you don't get it, and all that kind of stuff. A lot of the time when I'd be recording something in the early days, I would really fight for my idea, and someone would have a different idea, and I'd think they were crazy. What are you talking about? It clearly goes like this, and then a year later, I'd go, man, I hate that idea. Like I won the argument. I got my idea, and now I'm thinking, damn it, it should have been the other thing. And so I realized that. And then these days, this is just never a problem. I love collaborating. And my attitude these days is, if you're lucky enough to have a great musician working on your song or whatever you're doing, let them bring what they've got. We've all got individually our own series of influences, our personalities, our lives, our musical skill. If you had the opportunity to hire one of the best drummers in the world to work on your album, why would you want to micromanage them? You want them to bring their thing to the record. And so that's the attitude I have these days. So I think one of the things that I started to do differently some years ago was I didn't complete the song that much. I kind of outline it, but I don't write it out note for note, because then I'm going to start getting attached to those ideas. So I write the song in much more of a looser template, similar to when I do professional gigs. I'll be playing covers or working on a tribute show or something, and there'll just be like an arrangement, and these are the changes, and you sort of fill in the rest. So I sort of did it that way, and that lets everyone bring their own thing in. I find that to be the most exciting thing, when a really, really good musician puts something down and you go, wow, I never thought of that. That's really, really cool,
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
So how do you get into your creative zone? Or are you like always on that, like, do you have to flip a switch? Do you have to like prep yourself when you're about to like start writing? Like, how does your creative zone work?
I'm most of my answers are like horribly pragmatic, but of course you have those moments, like the worst possible time, 3 a.m, you suddenly get an idea and you're like, well, I guess I'm not sleeping tonight. You have those moments, but to actually get myself in the zone, I find that it's actually really practical. Like we have a noisy world, we have a world full of notifications and things interrupting us. I find the best thing to do is turn it all off and close the door, and just to allocate a decent amount of time just to be alone in a room for 2 hours with no distractions. It just starts to fire. So it's not so much about the music for me, because I feel like that's always there. It's more about clearing away the distractions so that I can actually get into it and focus on it.
Yeah. Awesome. How do you keep yourself motivated and going, right? Like, burnout is a real thing, especially in this industry. As much as you love it and everything, I mean, it's easy to just overdo it. So how do you balance everything?
Well, I'm not great at the balance thing because I certainly suffer a lot of fatigue, and I'm very tired this morning, I have to say. And, I'm not very good at sleeping, and like I'm trying to actually remedy. This is one of my life goals in the last year or so, is to try and figure out how to not always be exhausted, and how to perhaps get rid of these dark light things under my eyes, But on the burnout side of things, that's such a real problem. And I don't really get burnt out by the music, but I get burnt out by the industry, and I get burnt out by the toxic people you come across. And it seems that it doesn't matter how professional you are or how decent a person you are, you just come across bad people and bad situations. And you think, by now I've seen it all, I know what to do to avoid that stuff. And then you just find yourself in it again and you go, what happened?
Yeah.
And so it seems like every now and then one of these things happens. And that happened again to me last year. I got really screwed over last year. And it really hurt. It really hurt deeply, because it also included people who I thought were friends who didn't stand up and do the right thing and so on. And it knocked me down, and I had to get through a phase of feeling, what's the right word? I guess it was a version of depression, but it was I guess feeling just let down, like really disappointed,
Yeah.
and it's like, this isn't fair. Like, I brought my best to this, and I still got screwed. So I mean, in that case, I have other friends and colleagues who really were great and supportive that got me through that. And I think I don't even quite know where I'm going with this. I don't know quite what my answer is. Like, I think it's so important to have good, positive people in your life. And there are a couple of people that I really always turn to, who I know they're going to tell me the truth. They're not going to, blow smoke up my ass or anything like that. If I'm wrong, they'll tell me. You know what I mean? They'll challenge me. But they're also the kind of people who will really have my back and really be there for me. And so I turn to those people, and they help me sort of sort it all back out again. But none of that really impacts the music for some reason, because that's mine.
Yeah.
The situation last year, that was a toxic manager who created an issue and all the rest of it. But that was a business thing, really. It was a musical project, but it was a business thing. But music's mine, and no one can touch that.
I love that.
Yeah. And you have to hold on. Sometimes you have to remind yourself and get back to that place. But that's my place. That's what I always do.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if that answered your question.
No, that was I think having that core group, whether it's one person or two people, or even if it's like not even a person in person, and it's just like a book that you go back to, or a podcast or something, but having that thing that kind of just circles you back and brings you down to earth,
Yeah.
Really important. Yeah.
Well, I always think about that first year when I was 12 and I was playing this beat up old nylon string, and I was just figuring it out, and you move one finger over and you go, wow, that totally changes the chord. And it's amazing. It's an amazing feeling. And that relationship that I had just between my head and the neck of the guitar, it was, just a short distance. There was no one else involved. There was no money. There was no contracts. There were no musicians. There was no industry. There was none of that crap, It was just me and the instrument. And that's always been my kind of safe place. And even in the middle of a really, really big gig, a really high pressured situation, if I feel a bit overwhelmed in the moment, that's kind of what I return to. Is it's just about me and the instrument. It's not about anything else. It doesn't matter how many people are out there. It's just about this distance right here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So important. I love that. This is so much fun. Okay, so I always like to, I know you're busy and I don't want to take a ton of your time, but I always like to wrap up with a bit of advice for the audience. So approaching it for, a lot of musicians, but also some other people who are just other creators. They write their blogs, they do photography. If you had to give them one piece of advice, what would that be?
The first thing that pops into my head is give up on the music industry. If you're a musician, the music industry doesn't work. It's not an industry. It's a dysfunctional con. And not to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but It didn't even work in the old days. And then it collapsed. Then it collapsed.
Collapse
Yeah, exactly. I realized in the early days, like, why do I want a record deal? And I thought, well, I want someone to pay for me to make the album. And I thought, well, I could just pay for it. And then I thought, well, then I would have to sign over all these rights and, lose my ownership and stuff like that. If I do it myself, I can own it, I want to sell tickets to shows. I want to do things like that. But why do I need someone else to do that? You know what I mean? I just kept sort of going through it and thinking, I can just do this myself.
Yeah.
And so that's the way that I look at it. I'm not saying that record companies are all bad, and I'm not saying all managers are bad or anything like that. But I think if you go into a professional relationship with someone, don't go into it because the kid in you is super excited to sign a record deal. Go into it because you have a really respectful, mutual relationship with that person or that team, and you can see not only what they're going to do for you, but what you're going to do for them. And you can really clearly see how the relationship is going to function properly and the end result. Because I think musicians often sign record deals and they don't really do the numbers, and they don't realize you're never going to see any money out of this. There are examples like, I believe the Dave Matthews Band pretty much used their record company just as distribution. And I think I'm right in saying that. They kind of own everything, and they've, I think that's really smart. So I guess, to not ramble too much, I think my answer is just problem solve. Don't default to the templates. Just problem solve and do it independently. Maybe the answer is to operate your career like a career has never existed before. Like you're inventing it for the first time. That's probably the way to find the right answer.
Yeah. Ignore everybody else, right?
Yeah.
Awesome. So good. This is so helpful for everybody.
I think that makes sense. Yeah.
It does. So Danny, where can people find you?
Right. So my website, dannymccrum.com, and McCrum doesn't have a B on the end. I'll just put that out there.
In the show notes too.
Cool. Yeah. I am on Facebook and Instagram. You can link that too, I guess. And the podcast is Don't Give Up Your Day Job.co.nz. I've since discovered that Americans tend to say don't quit your day job. So it's not that. And by the way, the idea behind the name of that was it's not supposed to be cynical. It's actually supposed to make the point that if you go full time with something like music, you're not going on holiday. It's just a new job. So don't give up your day job, meaning like this is your new day job. You now operate your business. So that's what it's supposed to mean.
I love it. It's got a double meaning, but I think I like that meaning better.
Yeah, well, that's kind of what it meant to us.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, I've also considered changing the name to just Don't Give Up, because that seems to be more important these days with everything that's going on. It's more like that's the important message is, it's not time to give up. It's time to lean in.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Always when you feel like quitting, like that's the point where most people stop when they feel like quitting, but it's the ones that push past that and continue on that make it. So
that's exactly right. And I read that in Richard Branson's autobiography many years ago, and he made the point, I forget exactly how he worded it, but it was something like, when the storm comes in and your inclination is to hide under the bed and batten down the windows, hide under the bed, you've got to respond proactively. You can't just hide. I think the term he used was expand your way out of it. When you get into a problem, expand your way out of it. And I didn't fully appreciate what that meant when I read that book, because that was almost 20 years ago. But I set up my company in 2005, and only 3 or 4 years later, the global recession hit. And obviously we're all hit by that. And I looked at the situation, and I just finished paying off my first album, and I had very little money left. So I looked at my savings, and I thought, okay, I can make it for about 3 months, and then I'm done. So I've got 3 months. I was joking to my friends going, I've got 3 months left to live. So I've got to figure out how to stretch that out. And I took that advice on board, and I thought, okay, the first thing to do is to refine everything. Like, look for any area where I'm unnecessarily spending money or wasting time. And I refined the whole thing. But then the idea of expand your way out of it, which to me was to sit there and go, okay, what other products can I add to my business? What other areas can I move into? Can I improve my branding? Can I improve my promotional, and marketing side of things? And I really, really reinforced the business and kept buying myself more time. And then the economy corrected itself eventually. And once it did, I actually came back a lot stronger than I'd gone in, and I'm still in business all these years later. So,
which is amazing, because you could have easily just put it on pause and said, all right, I'm going to come back to this when it's over, or, gave up completely. So, I mean, that's
and it's
amazing.
the same thing. It's the same thing now, isn't it? Now
Absolutely. Yeah.
we're all up against it now, and we're all being tested. So,
but it's amazing to see all of the ways people are handling it, and everyone's getting so creative on how to overcome like not being able to perform live as much and everything like that. So it's just amazing to kind of see, like, yes, it's tough, but there's also a lot of beautiful things that have come out of it too,
I totally agree. Yeah. And I mean, there's so many awful things happening, but to focus on the positive side of it, I think it's good to have a shake up, and it's happening here in our music industry. I mean, I've always believed that having multiple streams of income will make you more robust in your business. If one or two of those streams starts to fail or just drop a bit, you've got something else going on. I know I've got some colleagues who are, and friends who are full-time musicians, and they're amazing, top pro level players playing with big names, the whole thing, but all they did was gig. And so when the lockdown hit, they were unemployed overnight, and of course no one knew how long it was going to last. And New Zealand ended up being the best case scenario. We're not in lockdown now, and we're able to play again now. But we didn't know, and these people are supporting their families and paying mortgages, and they'd gone from this thriving career to nothing. Whereas I always had all these other things going on. So I certainly lost all my gigs too, but I was able to sort of keep working online and keep a few other things going. So I've been all right, So I think there's something in that.
For sure.
Yeah.
Multiple streams of income. That'll save you for sure.
It's a good term, eh? I can't remember where I got that from, but I like the term.
Awesome. Well, it has been such a pleasure to talk with you. Thank you so much for coming on. I'm so excited to hear the feedback from this episode, and it was a great interview. So I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. It's been really fun, and it's really flown by. I kind of felt like we're just getting started.
I know, right? We'll have to do this again. We'll have a comeback where we get you back on.
I'd love to. I'd really love to. Yeah. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We'll talk to you later.
Sounds good. See you later.
All right, and that's a wrap for episode 4, an interview with Danny McCrum, New Zealand's. Very lucky to have you, Danny. I hope you guys enjoyed. All of Danny's links are going to be in the show notes. If you would like to connect with me, you can find me on Instagram at KatieAnne.Coaching. Anne has an E at the end. Or you can go to my website, KatieAnneCoaching.com, where we can connect. You can listen to more podcast episodes and feel free to kind of explore the realm of creativity coaching. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please feel free to send me a direct message. I always welcome feedback, and if you have a second, please take some time to leave a review. It goes a long way, and it helps me to make sure I'm providing you guys with really useful content, because at the end of the day, this is to help you and your creativity juices flow so that you can be more successful, fulfilled, and live a more purposeful life. With all that said, thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk to you next time on Creative Clarity.